Meet Sarah. She's been podcasting for a year, pouring her heart into every episode. But despite her efforts, she's stuck at 500 downloads. Now, meet Mike. He started 6 months ago and just hit 10,000 downloads. The difference? It's all about strategy. In this video, we're going to explore what sets successful podcasters apart. We'll look at various aspects of podcasting, from guest selection to promotion tactics, and see how small changes can make a big impact. By the end, you'll have a clear picture on how to boost your podcast performance and avoid common pitfalls that keep shows from growing. I'm Misbah Haque, by the way, if this is our first time meeting. In 2016, I started my very first podcast out of my childhood bedroom. No audience, no credibility. I was 22 at the time. And within a year, by episode 14 and episode 17, I had met the CEOs who would give me my dream internship and my dream job in the Bay Area. In that job, I got to work for a professional athlete, and I did help him launch his own podcast and co-hosted that as well. It's called Look Good, Move Well with Marcus Philly, and that has gone on to do over 1 million downloads and has become a successful acquisition channel. And in 2020, I went all in on Pod Mahal to help people own their means of production through consulting and done-for-you production plans. I also test a lot of these strategies out in real time on my own show called Habit Chess Podcast. So anyway, what if I told you that your podcast's biggest problem isn't your content? You've poured hours into crafting the perfect episodes, fine-tuning your audio and nailing your intro and outro. But still, those download numbers just aren't budging. It's frustrating, but here's the thing. You might be falling into what I call the top of funnel trap. Let's talk about the podcast funnel for a second. Imagine a giant funnel where podcast listeners enter at the top and gradually work their way down as they become loyal listeners of your show. The top of this funnel is all about awareness and capturing attention. It's where people first discover that your podcast exists. This might be through social clips or one of those tweet reels. The middle is where they listen and you are now building trust. And the bottom is where they hit the subscribe button, come onto your email list, or maybe pay for your products and services. Now, here's where most podcasters go wrong. They focus all their energy on creating amazing content, which is great, but that's most likely going to be consumed in the middle of your funnel. They're perfecting their product for an audience that they don't have yet. It's like throwing the world's best party, but forgetting to send out the invitations. No matter how awesome your podcast is, if nobody knows about it, those download numbers won't budge. This is where expanding your reach becomes crucial. It's about getting your podcast in front of new eyes and ears. To grow, you need to tap into new audiences, communities, and platforms. Understanding where your potential listeners hang out online and offline is essential. Are they on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all three of them? Do they attend certain events or conferences? Once you know where they are, you can begin to show up in those spaces, not just to promote your podcast, but to genuinely engage and build a relationship. When you start focusing on the top of your funnel, you can dramatically speed up your growth. It's like turning on a tap. Suddenly, instead of a trickle of new listeners, you've now got a steady stream. And as you add more people to the top of your funnel, naturally, a percentage of them will flow down to the middle and bottom. But I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but how do I actually fill the top of that funnel? Well, that's where strategy comes in. And to really understand how this works in practice, let's look at Sarah's story. Sarah's been podcasting for a year, and despite creating amazing content, she's stuck at about 500 downloads. Her journey is going to teach us a lot about what not to do, and more importantly, what to do instead. Let's take a closer look at Sarah's journey. She's been releasing a new episode every single week for a year without fail. That's 52 episodes of carefully crafted content. Sarah's done everything right when it comes to creating a great podcast. She's passionate, consistent, and her content is top notch. But here's the thing, she's still stuck at 500 downloads. Now you might be thinking, 500 downloads, that's not bad for a new podcast, right? And you'd be correct. To a point. The problem is that Sarah's numbers haven't grown in months. She's hit a plateau and it's starting to wear on her motivation. Every time she uploads a new episode, she hopes that this will be the one that breaks through. But week after week, the numbers stay the same and sometimes go down. So what's holding Sarah back? It's not her content. It's not the consistency. Those are solid. The issue lies in her strategy, or her lack of one. Sarah's fallen into a common trap that many podcasters find themselves in. She's focused so much on creating great content that she's neglected the equally important part of getting that content in front of people. Now I know what you're thinking. Isn't great content supposed to just speak for itself? In an ideal world, Yes. But we're living in a world where tens of millions of people are competing for your attention. Your content needs to be great, absolutely, but it also needs to be discovered. This is where Sarah's strategy falls short. She's not doing anything to actively expand her audience. She's not guesting on other podcasts, leveraging any free social platforms to begin to build a community, or collaborating with other creators in her niche. You want to think of her as a musical artist that has created this beautiful album. There might be 15 tracks on them, but now you have to go and do the radio shows. You got to go perform them at concerts. You got to do all the other things that lead people to come back and want to download the album. The frustrating part is that Sarah's so close to breaking through. Now imagine if Sarah had a blueprint for success, a method that could take her podcast from 500 to 10,000 downloads. It sounds a little too good to be true, right? But that's exactly what happened to Mike. His secret wasn't just about working harder, it was about working smarter. Mike is a podcaster that started around the same time as Sarah, but while Sarah struggled to grow her audience, Mike's just took off like a rocket. In just 6 months, he hit the 10,000 download mark. So how did he do it? Was it luck? Was it a bigger budget? Yeah, maybe some of those things, but it was mainly about the strategy that he executed. Let's break down what Mike did differently. He made sure that people knew about his content. He didn't wait for his listeners to find him. He went out and got them. Mike's approach to guest selection and cross-promotion was strategic. He carefully chose guests with engaged audiences that weren't too big where they would ignore him, but weren't too small where he wouldn't benefit. Every time Mike hosted a guest, he also had an opportunity to appear on that guest's show if they had one. This expanded his reach rapidly. And the good news is you don't have to be just famous with tens of millions of followers to appear on some of these shows. You don't even need to go after some of the mainstream shows that you know about. There are dozens and dozens of shows made up of smaller audiences that are actively searching for stories and guests like you. So yeah, it takes a little bit of hustle. You're not going on one show and getting 1 million new people into your audience. You might be getting 10 here, 100 there, another couple hundred over here. But that grind pays off in the long run because your audience compounds if you continue to build the relationship. Social media was crucial in Mike's growth because remember, these platforms are free and it's often just your ability to use them to the max potential. So he started with Instagram because that's where he had the most following and wanted to see the most growth. But that same content that he was publishing there was now being repurposed onto Threads, X, and LinkedIn, even though he didn't use those platforms before. This in many cases immediately 4x'd his reach because he was now posting on 4 different platforms. The other thing that Mike did, which Sarah didn't, is that instead of just focusing on clips, he actually took advantage of pulling concepts and themes and repackaging them in different ways. So he might pull 3 or 10 different ways to do something and package that up into a carousel type post. Or there might be a really powerful quote or 2 to 3 sentences that could be turned into a tweet graphic or reel. What you realize is most people are not thinking outside of the box when it comes to podcast promotion. All they're thinking about is short form clips. So Mike also took the approach of focusing on long form clips because the long form clips did not need as much editing and retention styled stuff as you do for social media sometimes. He was able to just make sure that there was a good beginning and good ending. And that 5 or 10 minute clip, sometimes even 15 or 20 minutes, could be a standalone clip on top of the full episode that was released on YouTube. So Mike's approach wasn't just about creating content. It was about creating connections. Okay, so let's dive into a couple of these strategies that you can begin implementing to break through that 1,000 download mark. First, let's talk about nailing your who. This is the most important because if you don't nail down exactly who you're talking to, it's going to sound like you're talking to a big group of people. When in fact, with podcasting, what you're trying to do is make it sound like you're talking to one specific person. When you're talking to a group, it's way harder for you to really tap into their hopes and dreams and fears and pains, versus if you're talking to one person, you know exactly the types of things that they would find cheesy or the things that they would really resonate with. Next up, guest selection. Making sure that you don't just go after the really, really big names, but also don't hold yourself back either. Sarah didn't go after a lot of these people because she thought they would say no, versus Mike took a chance and happened to land one person out of like 10 or 15 really big people, and that one person had a very big impact on his show. Because now you could take that episode and you could use it as an example when you're pitching other guests. And once you land one famous guest, it's way easier for you to land your second one. So take the shot, but also don't just go after the big names. Focus on people who are going to bring interesting conversation and great stories, because ultimately those are the things that end up translating to great clips or awesome pull quotes. So I hope you can see how guest selection isn't just about, do they have a big following and will it transfer over to mine? It's about, are they even bringing an interesting concept to your show, an interesting episode that more and more people would enjoy? Sometimes when podcasts are starting out, just to fill their queue for the next week, they talk to people that they don't really feel engaged with or are interested in. And that shows in the full episode, but also in the clips when you try to go and find interesting stuff to pull. The next strategy is noteworthy, and it's the one that I hope that you take with you if you just take one thing from this video. Mike focused on building his email list, and this is because it helps you deplatform all these faceless views and subscribers and likes. Remember, even on high value platforms like YouTube, it's just a number. You don't really get to see all of the names unless somebody comments or they reveal themselves, right? So having a way where you can actually blast to 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people eventually, hey, my episode is out. Hey, I have something here that you might like. And now, instead of just letting Apple or Spotify or YouTube choose, hey, we're going to send it to 10 people or 20 people, you've got that email list to give you a head start of 500,000 people that are going to that episode. And again, that's signaling the juices with a lot of these algorithms like, hey, people are interested in this. So instead of just relying on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube to maybe send your stuff to like 10 new people, you're controlling that process in your own hands by collecting a list of 10, 100, or 1,000 people eventually, where when you blast out an email for a new episode, you know that you can drive people to this. And guess what? That steamrolls, right? When there's a lot of people going to an episode, it signals to the algorithm, hey, this is good, let's send it out to more people. The reason I mention this is because most people don't even think about the email list. They're so obsessed with the download numbers and the views and the subscribers that they're getting. It's like if you just shift your focus 10 degrees and focus on email subscribers, that is a valuable metric, and maybe even more valuable than just your total YouTube subscribers. You now have a name and a contact for every single top fan that watches or listens to your stuff. So remember, the biggest misconception is that podcasting is the top of the funnel. It's not. It's the middle of the funnel. It's where trust is built. The top of the funnel is where all of these social platforms that people are already hanging out at, this is where you are capturing people. And what's cool is you don't have to be talking about the exact same stuff, right? Your podcast could be about fitness, but you might be talking about nutrition, and you might bring in 10% of new people into your world from talking about that. So you have a lot more room at the top of your funnel to talk about different things, to capture different audiences from different places, and then ultimately pull them into the middle of your funnel to build trust with your podcast. And then the bottom of the funnel, hopefully you have your email list set up where now they can give you their name and contact, which, remember, in today's day and age is almost as great as them giving you their wallet. So a lot of these strategies allow you to bypass waiting 3 years for Apple and Spotify to keep pushing and blowing up your stuff. You take matters into your own hands and shorten that curve by actually going through some of these steps, mastering your distribution, and honestly, focusing even more attention on that in some ways than just the full episodes. So remember, podcasts will one day become an acquisition channel for you and your brand. But in the short term, what it is more of a nurture tool. So anytime somebody new comes into your world, they saw your Instagram reel on the explore page, discover page, boom, they come into your world. Now they have something of substance to dive into, right? Not just 10 more short form clips, that's cool too, but we want them to take the next step and go, you know what, instead of 60 seconds, I'm going to give you 60 minutes of my time now. That's saying something big. And because podcasts have such a great way of building trust, you just have to make sure that that last part with the email list is set up. It's a set it and forget it type thing. Okay, you don't have to be constantly tweaking it. So remember, it's about using your podcast as a means for the rest of your production, not treating them as separate endeavors. So the newsletters here, it's something totally different. My short form clips will be totally different. It's like, how do we use the podcast to make it easy for you to be on more platforms, get in front of more people, and all without increasing your time and to-do list that's invested into this. So start with distribution in mind and then work backwards from there. And if you can keep up this process for more than just a couple of months and you can do it consistently, I guarantee you, you're going to find yourself breaking through that 1,000 download mark. And if you're feeling discouraged, know that it's supposed to be this hard. It's normal. The first 100 downloads is the hardest. The first 1,000 downloads is the hardest, just like it is with YouTube subscribers. But once you cross 1,000, right? I've seen this with client shows. Once you cross 1,000 subs and you're now getting your way towards 9 or 10,000, that's still tough, right? But things get gradually easier once you've found the first 100. I often say that the hardest part is getting a new podcast or a new YouTube channel to the first 100 subscribers. So if you do some of these things, you're going to be more in control of crossing that 1,000 download mark and not just relying on Apple or Spotify to give you your 5 minutes of fame. With knowing where podcasting and where social and where your email list fits into the funnel, you'll have a reliable system that is actually predictable over time. So I hope this was useful. Make sure to check out some of the free tools and templates and all that good stuff I have in the description below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll talk to you soon.